All right, picture this, a tiny, brand new country. I mean, it's basically a swamp, and it just got out of an 80-year war for its own survival. So what do you think happens next? You'd probably guess they struggle for a while, right? Well, what if I told you they became the wealthiest, most powerful trading hub on the entire planet? Because that's exactly what happened. This is the incredible story of the Dutch Golden Age, and you're not going to believe how they pulled it off. And I'm not exaggerating here. Back in the 17th century, the brand spanking new Dutch Republic had the highest standard of living in Europe. You could even say the entire world. I mean, think about it. While the rest of Europe was dealing with famine, plagues, and constant wars, the Dutch, well, they had overflowing granaries, packed cities, and a kind of prosperity that was just completely off the charts for the time.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did a tiny, brand new republic, fresh out of an 80-year war, achieve this? What was their secret sauce? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of three things, really. A totally radical new way of governing, an economy that was just an absolute monster, and a culture that basically became a magnet for genius.
Okay, first things first, let's set the stage here. To really get how big of a deal this was, you have to understand where they came from. Seriously, these guys were the ultimate 17th century underdogs, forged in the fire of what must have felt like a never-ending war. For 80 long years, they were locked in this brutal fight against the Spanish Habsburg Empire, one of the superpowers of the day. The whole thing was kicked off by religious tensions, Protestant versus Catholic, plus crazy high taxes, and just a deep desire to run their own show. But here's the kicker. By the time they officially got their independence in 1648, they weren't just licking their wounds. Nope. They were already building the foundations for taking over the world, economically speaking. So, what was that first ingredient in the secret sauce? It was their government. They set up a political system that was completely, totally different from anything else in Europe. Get this. It was a government built for one thing: making money. Not for the glory of some king. I mean, just look at the difference here. You had powerful kingdoms like France and Prussia, where absolute monarchs called all the shots. It was all top-down rule. But the Dutch, they went the complete opposite way. They were all about decentralized power. Their main goal wasn't conquest or royal glory. It was commercial prosperity, plain and simple. Now, in reality, what they had was an oligarchy. That's just a fancy word for a system where a small group of people holds all the power. But here, the really important part isn't just that it was an oligarchy, but who those people were. See, the people running the show were the burghers, basically the wealthy businessmen and merchants, along with some big landowners. Power wasn't held in one central place. Instead, it was spread out among the provinces. The main federal government, the States General, it was surprisingly weak. For any big decision, they needed everyone to agree. And what that meant, in practice, was that government policy always, and I mean always, put business interests first. But wait a minute. You might be thinking, what about defense? Who's in charge if you get attacked? Well, for that, they had the stadholder. This was basically a provincial official in charge of the military. It was a smart way to get leadership when you needed it, but without creating a permanent king. It perfectly shows their monarchy hangover. They were deeply suspicious of giving one person too much power, but they were also practical enough to know they needed a general in wartime. All right, on to pillar number 2. Let's talk about how this business-first government lit a fire under their economy. Because, folks, they didn't just get good at trade, they became the undisputed masters of it. And the beating heart of this whole operation was Amsterdam. You have to understand, in the 17th century, Amsterdam was Wall Street, London, and Silicon Valley all rolled into one. It was the global hub, the nerve center for all international trade and banking. And a huge reason they got so dominant was that they basically perfected this game-changing financial invention, the joint stock company. It's a simple but brilliant idea. Say you want to fund a huge, risky voyage to Asia. Instead of one rich guy footing the whole bill, you sell shares to hundreds of people. This way, you pool a ton of money and everyone shares a little bit of the risk and, hopefully, a lot of the profit. The poster child for this whole model, the Dutch East India Company, better known as the VOC. Now listen, you gotta understand, this was not just a company. It was a monster, a state-backed behemoth. It pooled incredible amounts of money from investors, and the government gave it a complete monopoly on the super profitable trade with Asia. But here's the craziest part. The VOC could wage war, it could sign treaties, it could build fortresses. It was basically a mega corporation with its own army and navy, and it used them, often brutally, to protect its profits. And holding all of this up was their absolute dominance of the seas. Sure, their location on the Atlantic helped, but their real secret weapon was technology. They came up with new ways to build ships that were faster, could carry way more cargo, and, this is key, needed a smaller crew to operate. This totally slashed their costs, and they could ship goods cheaper than anyone. They basically became the FedEx of the 17th century, connecting all of Europe to the rest of the world. Okay, so we've got a government that's all about profit, and an economic engine that's taking over the world. But there's a third piece to this puzzle, and this is the part that made the Golden Age truly golden. It was their culture. A culture that acted like a magnet for talent and genius. This quote right here says it all. In Amsterdam, profit is the first commandment, and freedom of thought is the second. They figured out something revolutionary for their time. Being tolerant wasn't just a nice idea, it was incredibly good for business. You have to remember, most of Europe was tearing itself apart with religious wars. But the Dutch Republic? It was a safe haven. They offered a level of religious freedom to different kinds of Protestants and to Jewish communities that was pretty much unheard of anywhere else. And what happened? The smartest, most skilled people and their cash flocked there from all over the continent. It created this incredibly stable, innovative, and ridiculously rich society. And you can literally see this change in their art. For centuries, who paid for art? The church and kings. But in the Dutch Republic, a whole new group of buyers emerged, the wealthy merchant class. And they didn't want giant paintings of saints or battles. No, they wanted art that reflected their lives, portraits of their families, calm landscapes, scenes of everyday middle-class comfort. This is a world that gave us masters like Rembrandt and Vermeer. And it wasn't just artists who were thriving. This same amazing environment of money and free thinking fueled a scientific revolution. So at the very same time that Rembrandt and Vermeer are painting these masterpieces, you have scientists like Christian Huygens making massive breakthroughs, like inventing the pendulum clock. It was this incredible ecosystem where art and science blossomed side by side. So what does this all add up to? What's the big takeaway? The Dutch Golden Age wasn't just some weird one-off thing in history. It was a blueprint. And you can still see its impact all around us today. Here's what you really need to remember. The Dutch proved that a republic run by merchants could actually outperform huge, powerful monarchies. They basically wrote the playbook for modern global finance. They pioneered the whole joint stock company model. They institutionalized global trade. In so many ways, the modern globalized world we live in, they built the first version of it. And all of this leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. Is the Dutch Golden Age the ultimate proof that it's commerce, not conquest, that builds the empires that truly last? Think about it. Their military might eventually faded, but their economic and cultural innovations have echoed for centuries. Maybe their story tells us that the most enduring power isn't built just on armies, but on a potent mix of money, new ideas, and the will to trade across the entire world. It's definitely something we're thinking about.